probably tried redstone in the past, and it just doesn't make sense. Well, I don't know if you've noticed yet, but redstone is pretty useful. And I say in these 5 minutes, you can go from redstone noob to better than most of your friends, which that's pretty decent for 5 minutes. Did you know that red bar at the bottom of your video is actually a loading screen for when you're gonna get epic at redstone? You're also probably pretty tired of all the tutorials being either for Java or Bedrock. Well, today I'm gonna be covering both. You're welcome. First, we start off, of course, with the basic lever. Pretty obvious, you can use this lever to transmit signals through redstone dust like this. And they have to be connecting. Buttons are the exact same way, except you press them and it holds it for a bit. So it turns on then off. And wooden buttons are actually slower than stone buttons, so if you want to do things that are a bit faster, use stone. Redstone dust, as shown here, is dust you can place on the floor and it connects to itself and other things, and you can use it to transmit signals, such as with redstone lamps. Redstone dust can also only go 15 blocks before it gets depleted. This is 15, and this is 16. In order to prevent this, use a redstone repeater. Make sure that's facing from where it's coming from, so like your power source, your button, to where you want it to go. See? And don't worry about the tick right now. This can make redstone lines travel indefinitely if you use enough repeaters. This next thing is something that's very confusing and not very clearly stated either. Hard powering and soft powering. When you use redstone to put power into a block, then this soft powers it. As you can see, it powers things like pistons and lamps around it, but then it doesn't power any other redstone dust touching it. It still powers repeaters, and when you use a repeater to power it instead, then it does hard power it. Everything that has been covered so far does apply for both Java and Bedrock, but if anything is different for either of them, then I'll specifically state it and show a side-by-side comparison. And please do tell me if I miss anything, because I'm not very familiar with Bedrock Redstone. Next we have the redstone torch, and as you can see, it is on right now. That is because nothing is powering it, but if I power it, then it goes off. It basically acts as a reverse, which as you can imagine would come in very handy for things like this. It's also very useful because it hard powers the top side of a block. It can also be placed on the side of blocks. Notice when this one is lit, then it doesn't make this one non-lit, because it only hard powers the block above it. I know, confusing. Pistons are where Java and Bedrock start to get just a little bit. Pistons are blocks that can extend and can actually push other blocks. Normal piston pushing it and then not retracting it, and sticky piston pushing it and then retracting it. And they cannot push loads of more than 12 blocks and cannot push certain blocks like obsidian. In Java Edition, container blocks such as chests or furnaces, they can't be pushed. In Java Edition, sticky pistons, when given a really short pulse, will actually act like normal pistons and not push them back. In Bedrock, obviously this is not possible. Observers detect changes in front of them. They detect such as when blocks are placed or destroyed, or even when redstone signals go on or off. They can also detect things such as when note blocks are used, or when string is walked on. They hard power the block behind them, which is this one, the one that the arrow is going towards. They can detect each other detecting each other like this, making for an infinite loop. And the signal that they output is this short signal that I was talking about earlier. So on Java, you can use this to do things like that. Hoppers are also incredible creatures. Well, you might have noticed it sucks up items that are thrown on top of it. It can't detect an item that's a block's gap, but blocks that are just a little shorter than normal blocks, it can detect it through that as well. Blocks that can contain items can actually get items from up here and be transported into the chest. And items inside of a chest or something will go down here. Dispensers and droppers. Now, on Java Edition, dispensers can do pretty much anything. They can be used to bone meal things, place and destroy water buckets, and shoot arrows. Also, I forgot to mention, on Java Edition, redstone lines go past pistons, while on Bedrock, it'll go to the side like this. Anyway, droppers actually do not fire arrows. Well, if you were to place something inside of a dropper and have a container in front of it, it actually places that item inside that container. And yes, that does apply for other droppers. See? The ticks on the repeater actually change how much of a delay there is. As you can see, it's an interval of 0.1 seconds. For longer times, then I suggest use a hopper clock. I know this looks kind of complicated, but there's a tutorial link in the description. Thank you so much to Waddles for this design. You can have this be very long, as you see. By the time that all of these get to 0 is when it will move. You're almost above average at redstone. But we have one more thing to cover. The comparator. And basically, while it does have quite a lot of functions, its main ones are being able to tell how many items are in a chest. This is in stacks, by the way. You can also do this through blocks. You can also flip on this torch right here, as you see, set it to subtract mode. Basically, it takes the signal strength of the one coming from this side of it, like the big side, from whichever side is the highest, and it subtracts the two. So it does, this one's 15 and then this one's 14, so it outputs 1, and you've made it. Subscribe.
Redstone can be confusing.